Perfect. Okay. I'm off. Thank you so much. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Okay, there we go.
There we go. Sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, no problem. You can hear me
Technology.
okay? Yeah, it always happens.
Hey, before we start, Stephen, I was just thinking, should I change my background? Because I'm in my kitchen. Is
You look fine.
that okay?
Oh, good.
Doesn't look too weird. Okay.
Good. Just thinking what kind of drink you could make tonight.
Oh, those are my spices and stuff, but it looks
Oh,
like a bar.
it
That's,
looks like,
that's fun.
looked like liquor.
That's my cookbooks, and then there's spice.
Okay, are we ready, folks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Natalie will edit this down.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the 2023 MindShift Entrepreneurship Conference here at Mohawk College. My name is Professor Stephen Stunt. I'm with the McKeel School of Business at Mohawk, as well as the Mohawk College Center for Entrepreneurship and Surge Mentoring Program. A little bit different this year. Our theme is going to be music and wine. And yes, there are entrepreneurs in music and entertainment, and there's certainly entrepreneurs in the wine sector. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Juliet Dunn. Juliet is the co-founder of the Niagara TD Jazz Festival, extraordinary musician, entrepreneur, always looking for her next gig. And Paul Speck is the president of the Henry of Pelham Family Estate Winery. So thank you for joining us and welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Great to be here, Steve. Thanks.
Let's start off, and who's going to be our audience is many students who study here at Mohawk. Is a big part of it. That a lot of them will study entrepreneurship. It's not a new topic, but it's a topic that's so important in today's economy of helping youth start new ventures. So let's start from the top. And feel free to talk whenever you want here. Juliet, how did it all start for you?
Oh gosh, I mean, the festival itself. So because I have several hats, so I sing. I also book other artists with my other company, and then the festival is another entity. So with the festival, it started back in 2014, and at the time, my late husband Peter, who's a jazz musician, piano player, singer, and drummer, we had started a jazz series in St. Catharines, and that was in 2011. And at first, we would feature our own bands in the series, and then bring in some other guests because, there was a financial risk. So we figured at least if we weren't making money, that's okay, but we can't expect other musicians to play for free. So that's how we started it off with volunteering our own time. And then as that series grew, we were able to bring in and pay other musicians. And then from there, that was 2011. In the summer of 2013, we said, let's do a festival. It was more my idea because I'd always wanted to do an outdoor summer festival. And I guess I got the bug for festivals back in the 80s when I lived in Europe. I went to the World of Music and Dance Festival. Peter Gabriel started it. And that year it was in Reading. I think it was like 1989 or something. And there's just something so magical about a summer festival, music and vendors and people of all ages and really great musicians. I mean, I saw Ravi Shankar, and so many great musicians, and it was all free. I think it was free. Maybe it wasn't free for that one because you would camp and stuff. But that's probably where I got the bug for festivals. And also when I was younger and living in BC, we'd go to folk arts festivals and things like that. So Peter and I were doing jazz, and we're jazz musicians. So we were doing our jazz series, but we wanted to take it to the next level and incorporate that summer festival vibe. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And then we knew nothing about starting a festival because a jazz festival is a not-for-profit organization. We started to do our research with our chair of the board at the time, who became our chair, Joe Robertson. And so we all researched and found out when you do a jazz festival, it's not a moneymaker. And if you want to get funding, you're going to be a not-for-profit organization. And so we took those steps into starting a not-for-profit organization and kind of went from there.
Awesome. And the journey continues.
Yeah, year 10. I can't believe it, actually.
Perfect. Paul,
Yeah.
I know a bit of your story and your background. How did you start and get into the wine business?
Well, Henry Pelham's a family-owned winery. It's owned and operated by myself and my two brothers. And the winery really started, my dad, we grew up in Toronto, and my parents ran a small high school in Toronto, private high school. And but my dad was from St. Catharines, and in the early 80s, the last remaining parcel of land that had been in our family name since 1794 came up for sale. One of our cousins, Neil Smith, who lived on the land and was actually a retiring school teacher, wanted to sever off this small piece of land. And so my dad, out of sentimental reasons, purchased it because he just remembered, being out here as a kid. And that was in 82. And then in 84, it was his idea. He decided to plant a small vineyard. And he really didn't know anything about wine. And, the Niagara Peninsula wasn't a very sexy area at the time, wine-wise. And I was in Toronto. I'm the oldest of the three brothers. I was in Toronto. I had an excellent job delivering pizzas for Pizza downtown Toronto, and I was making what I felt was a lot of money. And I got the first lesson in family businesses. My dad said, because he owned the car I was using, he said, you got to quit your job and drive your brothers to St. Catharines, and with your cousin, plant a small vineyard. And so that's what we did in 1984. And then while we were going through school, we would work on the vineyard in the summers. And then I graduated, and my dad wanted to start a small winery. Like, it was a small retirement project for him. He wanted to retire from education and sort of move back to Niagara. And so I said to him, well, I want to take a year off between university and whatever I was going to do next. And I said, well, I'll help you get this winery off the ground. And unfortunately, he got sick and passed away early on. And I ended up, running the winery and taking over early on. And my two brothers, as they went through school, worked on the vineyards. And when each of them graduated, I said, well, give me a year to help me out here and then go get a real job. And they stuck with it. And so all three of us still work at the winery, and it's kind of grown from there.
Wow. Two interesting stories. I had a student ask me the other day, and the student said to me, are entrepreneurs different in the way they think? And I think they are. Any thought on that? Are entrepreneurs more creative? Are entrepreneurs adverse to risk? What's their mindset? What's different about an entrepreneur? Juliette, go ahead.
Yeah. So as a student, I think I found it very hard to focus on one thing. So for me, being an entrepreneur, and especially with a jazz festival, there's so many moving parts. So that really suits my personality. When I was in high school, I couldn't think of one thing I wanted to study for 4 years, because I knew, wow, 4 years of the same thing, I thought I'd get bored. So with a jazz festival, it really works with my kind of brain. And I think, I think you do need to be quite creative. You mentioned the word risk. You definitely cannot be afraid of taking risks, because there are no guarantees, as an entrepreneur, and like musicians, we don't get, well, now actually I do have a salary with the festival I built, but not at first, right? But I've never had kind of the paycheck every 2 weeks before, always looking for the next gig. So sometimes things go really well, and sometimes, you lose money, but so you can't be afraid of risk. So I think it's not for everyone.
Yeah. Paul, do you think entrepreneurs think differently?
Yeah, I do. I don't know that you're an entrepreneur until you sort of get, you kind of fall into it, I think, in some ways. And, I think to Juliette's point, this is a less delicate way of saying what Juliet was saying, but the entrepreneurs tend to be like the freaks. They're not normal. They're prepared to, I don't, it's funny about risk. Risk is such a big part of starting your own business and, going down that route. And I always say, I don't think you have to take risk, and you have to learn to live with risk. I don't think you ever get comfortable, at least I can speak for myself. You're always taking risk, but it doesn't mean that you're immune to the stress of that. So it's something that you have to be comfortable with, because there's nobody that's covering you. You're on your own. It's sink or swim, or you're flying without a net. And that sort of energy that comes from success and failure, because there's going to be a lot of failure, that energy that you get from both, I think is something that, you have to, be energized by and not be deflated, although, it can get difficult at times. So, yeah, I think entrepreneurs do think differently. They're prepared to, not necessarily ready for like the 9-to-5 regular job, I guess.
And that's interesting. I had an outstanding entrepreneur. I can't mention who it is. And what he told me, his line was, he said, Steve, you've heard of this term, win or lose? I go, yeah. And he said, as an entrepreneur, it's win or learn.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean by that? He says, well, as an entrepreneur, it's okay to make mistakes, because that's how we learn. And that's how we move forward. The other thing that, in my research with entrepreneurship, and I know so many small business owners, they tell me that an entrepreneur is a person that would rather work 14 hours a day for themselves just to avoid working 8 hours a day for somebody else. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that there's a level of freedom that you get working for yourself that
Sure.
money can't buy, and certainly has always driven me that it was not necessarily about money. It was really about just the total freedom you get from owning your own business. And to the point of failure, it's, took me a long time to learn in terms of getting over it. I don't handle failure well. It's something that when we do fail, and you fail a lot, when I was younger, it was difficult for me to, because it becomes very personal, right? The business becomes an extension of your, your creativity and your personality. And when it doesn't go well, you can take that personally. And that's something that is learned as well, that you need to learn from your mistakes, but also get over it, because you will, dust yourself off and try again. It doesn't mean that you're a total loser when you fail, because a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, they're tough on themselves.
Yeah. And you feel the same way, Juliet?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of failure, but it's those successes, it's the moments of success that make up for it. Also, with the festival, especially when it's the summer fest in the park, those events, there's so much running around, and it's so many moving parts, and it can be very stressful. But then when the music starts,
yeah,
everything else just kind of fades, So, and anything I've been through all year, the music starts, and that's what it's all about. And it just makes up for everything else, and that's just wonderful.
When the music starts, or when the bottle of wine gets opened, I guess.
That's right.
Ideally, both at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
Tell me, what do you hate most about being an entrepreneur? What's the thing you get up in the morning, or what keeps you up at night, or what you walk into your office, or you walk into your kitchen and say, I got to do this today? What is it that really makes you go, what am I doing this for? Paul?
I think, we just completed our 34th vintage, so it's been 34 years of making wine for me.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, I'll come into the office and I'm like, oh, am I dealing with that again? Because, there are reoccurring problems, HR. There's, piece of equipment breaks down, and you're in the middle of harvest, and it's like, am I really dealing with that again? Or so there's a, you know, it's sort of like a NASCAR race, those oval tracks. And after a while, you're going to come around the circle a few times. And so that can get, tiresome at times. Having said that, it's also, I never get tired of pushing the envelope and growing the business. So as you grow the business, even though, you'll have those moments, and you have them, it's, you're not doing your job if you're not in some ways doing things that you don't want to do, but they just have to get done. But it all gets, it's like what Julia was saying, when the music starts, you kind of forget it all.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way of thinking. So we've just gone through this horrendous 2 years and a little bit of COVID. And, I've talked to so many business owners and, different issues and challenges, whether it would be HR, staffing, or venues closing. How did both you kind of approach that issue and look at, getting out of COVID and surviving? How did you do it? Juliette?
Yeah, we were fortunate in that because we're not for profit and now charitable organization, we do get a lot of funding from the government.
Okay.
So I had written grants, hoping for a season in 2020. And then as things started to shut down, we already had a big grant that had come in from Ontario Creates. So we had money to do something, but we knew we couldn't gather. So we had to do what a lot of people did. And we did it very quickly. We pivoted because we already had a jazz series that was going since January of 2020. And we had our third of the fourth shows was on March 9th. And so, COVID was right there. And then our last show was supposed to be of that series supposed to be March 30th. So obviously we were all locked down. So we quickly pivoted and did that show online. And not very well the first time because we didn't know how to work with the technology. The artist was in his home in Hamilton. And I got him to log into my Facebook page and as me. And, it was very, whoopsies. Oh, an alarm's going off. Oh. Sorry about that. Just a second. I'm hearing, I just want to turn that off.
We can edit this out.
Okay, good. Yeah. Whoa. Okay. So there we go. So I'll start again from the, sorry about that. Whoops. So we had an event on March 30th, which we pivoted right away. And the artist logged into my Facebook account that first time because we hadn't done live streaming really before. And from then we just continued to adapt throughout the season. And we ended up over the 2 years, I think, doing about 150 live streamed shows.
Wow.
We learned a lot. We learned the hard way. Speaking of like failures, I mean, sometimes some of the streams were just awful, with technical difficulties, but people were so hungry we were all so hungry just to be connected, and we found ways to get through it.
Yeah.
And so, and then, as everyone knows, the rules were changing every 2 days. So sometimes we thought we could do a show, then we were told only 25 people could gather. So we just got better and better at adapting to the situation. So.
And that's the word. You had to adapt.
Yeah.
And isn't that really what entrepreneurs have to do almost every day? They have to adapt in some way. Paul, how did COVID affect the winery sector?
Yeah, it really turned us upside down. We were considered an essential service, and it seems weird that wine would be considered an essential service, but the vineyards don't stop growing and the wine needs to get made, otherwise it'll go bad. So we had to shut certain parts of the business down, like all of our salespeople. They weren't allowed to go into the LCBO stores, because the LCBO wanted to obviously keep as many, just focus on customers. And but our whole, from the farming to the wine production side, was full going. And because our sales and on-site sales were still going, our whole marketing and administrating team had to work. So we were fully operational. We sent everybody home. The three brothers would go in because we could, but and then we had some accounting people here and we just kind of cleared the deck so that they had lots of space. But the winery was really difficult because bottling and winemaking, we had to completely change how we, did things, scheduling. It was quite interesting, and a lot of channels that we would normally sell to closed. For example, restaurants, airlines, all of those went to zero, like immediately. And then other channels that we even struggled, like online. We struggled to sell people a case of wine through the internet, through our website. And, I'll never forget the first day I came into the office after they had shut us all down. The whole country was basically shut down in March. Our online sales went from, it was hundreds of cases, and we had to figure out how to deal with that because we weren't set up to ship or deliver, administer that kind of business. So some channels grew, other ones went to zero, and it really became an issue, as you said before, of adapting and changing.
Yeah.
And the one thing that, and I kept saying to all my employees, I'd have regular communication. So we would have every weekly teams meetings with divisions within the companies to make sure I stayed connected with everybody, that there was maximum communication, over communication, and a lot of empathy that I'm not used to, quite frankly. I became much more empathetic to everybody's situations because, it was difficult. You're at home, they have young kids running around, you've got to get a project done. And, it was just difficult for everybody. And so I used to just say to everybody, there's no playbook for this. So we're just going to keep making it up as we go and work together. And it worked out. I was very, very proud of our staff, and they were very safe.
Mm-hmm. And this question, it might not relate to you, Gillette. I'm not sure if you have employees right now. Paul, this might relate a bit more to you. One of the things I hear from entrepreneurs and business owners is that from an HR standpoint, so as we get out of COVID, they're having such a hard time finding help, finding employees. It's happening in the restaurant sector, the hospitality sector. Are you seeing that in a negative way of having any effect on your business and your operations?
Yeah, we on a positive way, we've had tremendous amount of, most of our people stayed with us through the whole thing. So we haven't had a lot of people leave, which has been great because that can get expensive.
Yeah.
But rehiring and new hires has been very difficult. And we've gone through some ups and downs. We seem to be a little better off now, but yeah, in certain areas, we just can't hire people. We can't find them. We don't know where everybody went. And we have a restaurant here at the winery. We had to change the way we did that. I mean, just constant change and dealing with this new reality that we seem to don't have enough. We seem to, in every industry, it seems like, doesn't have enough people to do the work required.
Yeah. And Juliet, I'm just thinking in your case, you've got probably volunteers.
Well, yes, we do. We have volunteers, but we do have a small staff now, myself and a general manager, but that's only since July 1st. But before that, we do get students every year. So every year we've been lucky enough to have one or two Canada summer job students and then one Ontario summer experience student. So this year it was harder to find students, and we weren't the only ones. Other organizations like the museum in Niagara on the Lake and different arts organizations shared with us the same. So we were wondering with the younger generation if maybe because we've all adapted so well to doing things online and people making money online, and maybe now this working in person isn't as appealing to the students. Perhaps we could, right? That's one theory, because it was the hardest it's ever been to just find students. So
a few more questions, and then I got to turn it over to, I got a couple of questions from some students I wanted to throw out, but we always hear, and I don't know if there's a magic answer, but we hear this term work-life balance. I don't think there is anything as work-life balance as an entrepreneur. What I do like this term is life uninterrupted. And what that means is that if you're working, you're working. If you're having downtime, you're having downtime, and the two shall not meet. How do you feel about that? Is that possible? Either one of you.
Well, for me, I struggle with that. And see, also, like I said, when the music begins, I mean, so that's still work. I'm at the event, but I'm also having a great time. And so it's really hard for me to separate both. And I mean, you know, with the festival, I'll be honest, for 9 years, it's been pretty much 24/7.
Okay.
When I go on a holiday, I'll be on my computer for several hours. You know, if my husband was asleep, he wouldn't even know. And I just do 6 hours of work before he even woke up. So I've always had trouble really separating. It's one of my New Year's resolutions is to hopefully be able to do a bit more separating, because with the festival now in year 10, I'm going to not be working every day and kind of have a general manager full time. So I'm going to try. I can't tell you right now if I'm going to succeed, but that's the goal.
Okay.
It is hard. It is hard when you enjoy what you do to really separate completely, I think.
Yeah. Can you separate it, Paul?
No, I haven't been great at that either. I struggle with it. It's funny because I lecture my employees about having a good work-life balance, but I know that me and my brothers, we work 24/7. I mean,
Yeah.
I never turn my phone off, and you know, it's funny because people say, well, you got to be, you know, that's not healthy, and I'm like, you know what, I love what I do, so it's not work.
Yeah.
It's like I wake up on Monday morning, I'm like, I can't get work, can't wait to get back to work. I got stuff I want to do, and so I've gotten better at it, and I'm taking more time off now that I'm getting older, and I've got, like Juliet, I've got more employees and systems, and so in some ways the work I do is not as, it's somewhat in some ways easier because I have a lot of cases way smarter people than me actually doing the stuff now, but it's difficult. But I think most entrepreneurs will say the same thing. It's like, if you know, if you love what you do, you'll do it. And it's not, I don't get stressed. Like if I pick up my phone on a Sunday and there's 2 or 3 emails that I'm looking at, like, wow, I should address those. I don't get stressed about that. In fact, I get stressed when I'm worried that there's something on there that I could fix really easily. But look,
Right.
it's something you have to learn to create balance in, and I'm working on that. That's, you know, as I get older, like I said, working on taking more time off, and, you know, not always checking the phone and that, and it is important, you know, especially if you've had some success, you know, you're in some ways you're just overdoing it, because the company can run without you. I mean, you haven't done a good job if it can't run without you.
Yeah, awesome. I like that answer. Here's a really interesting question, and this is one of my last, and then I go to a couple of student questions.
Can I jump in, Steve, before, just to add on
go
to
ahead.
that, just before we go to the next one, because I remembered a story when I first started the festival. So back in 2014, I bumped into Christopher Newton, who used to run the Shaw Festival.
Yeah.
And he's the reason I moved to Niagara, because I was hired by Christopher to come to Shaw back in 2002. So I bumped into Christopher, and, you know, my mind goes, there's so many ideas in my mind. And with the festival, it was, I wasn't sleeping a lot. And I said to Christopher, I don't know how to shut down my mind, all these ideas. And I said, how do you do it? And he just looked at me, and this was, you know, several years ago. And he said, I haven't slept in 35 years, he said. And I said, please don't tell my husband, because he won't want me to do this. But yeah, so like Paul said, I think all entrepreneurs, it's kind of the same, right? The mind doesn't really shut down. And when you love what you do, it doesn't bother you to keep working, right? So
I love that story. That's a great story.
yeah.
Listen to this question really carefully. If you're both still in business 6 months from now, and I think you both will be in business 6 months from now, what will be the reason why? Juliet?
For the love of music.
For the love?
Yeah, for the love, the passion.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I think Same. I love what I do. I love working with my brothers. I love working with all our employees, and we have some cool ideas that are new that we're working on right now, and I'd love to see them, get launched in a while and see if they succeed. So those are all, I'm still very, very, very energized by, the whole thing. And competition is a good thing. Makes it, when it's competitive, and in our industry, I think every industry is very competitive in its own, there's idiosyncrasies in every one, but it's very competitive, and you got to keep the foot on the gas full bore, or you're not going to succeed. You can't ever let up. And I thrive under that, even though it can be tiring. I thrive under those conditions. So 6 months is like tomorrow. I think much longer.
Yeah.
Juliet, you still get that buzz and great feeling when you get the phone call about a gig?
Oh, so that's my other hat as an artist, like as a singer. Yeah, I mean, always. And I mean, I haven't, I'll be honest, the last 9 years, I've really been focusing on the festival more than my own career. You can look at my website and see like, oh my gosh, it's so outdated. The festival stuff is always on the go, up to date. And that's part of my kind of new plan, is working less with the festival, because now I can step back. I'll still be the face of the festival and still doing the artistic programming. And now it's almost like I'm going to be starting over as an artist, just, getting all of my social media stuff in order and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm always excited to sing, and especially with my French band. That's the one I want to focus on
Awesome.
now.
I love it. From a student in our global business program, taking entrepreneurship right now, they've been in Canada now for 4 months. And it's really cool, that global business program and international business management, they come from all over the world. I had a class just before we came on here this morning at 8:30, and I just reminded myself, how blessed I am and lucky I am. I have students that represent 9 countries from around the world. So I get to learn from them just as much as they get to learn from me, which is a wonderful feeling. So knowing this, I asked the question, if you had to ask a question to 2 seasoned entrepreneurs, what would it be? And they had just a very simple question. As a student studying entrepreneurship and looking at starting our own business at some point, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but maybe 2 years down the road, what's the one piece of advice your panel could share? So what would you tell that student looking to start a business, that maybe a lesson that you've learned, either one of you here?
Well, I think I would say don't lose hope. Like, it's, I always say, I was talking to somebody about, we just sold a lot of wine to a certain place, and I, they're saying, oh, that's amazing, you must feel good. I'm like, yeah, it's been a 30-year overnight sensation. I mean, it takes time, and a lot of people are going to say no to you. They're going to tell you that's a crazy idea. Nobody does it that way. You got to look at what's already happening. But if you copy what's already happening, you're not new. You're the same guys.
Yeah.
So you got to do something different, and you likely will do something different. And there's going to be a lot of pressure for you to conform to what is already out there, because that's the safe way to go. And you have to resist that. And never lose faith in your ideas. That doesn't mean that if they're wrong or they don't work, you need to learn and adjust and pivot to get them to where you finally need them to be successful. But you'll be told no a lot, and you got to get ready for that.
We always talk in our classes, with these young entrepreneurs, is how important it is in your product or service that you're offering, finding your point of difference. What's your competitive advantage over the next guy? Juliet, go ahead. What are your thoughts, advice?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Don't be discouraged. Never give up. And I remember when, talking to people saying, yeah, we're going to start a festival. And so many people say, oh, a new business, it takes at least 3 years. And I thought, yeah, whatever. but they were right, and sometimes longer. But I was just so ready to go, and I thought, why are they being so negative, saying it's going to take 3 years? But it really does take time. It takes time to build and differentiate yourself, build your brand, and so on and so on. So yeah, you definitely need to just hang in there, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's great advice from both of you. Great advice from two, what I'm going to call seasoned entrepreneurs. That doesn't mean you're old. Seasoned has a lot of different connotations, but I just want to thank you both for joining us here today. I really enjoyed your thoughts. It's so important that our youth and our community partners hear stories from real entrepreneurs, hear your journey, hear where you've been, hear where you're going, some of the ups, some of the downs along the way. We've all been there, but I want to thank you. I have this vision in my head, and maybe we'll all have this conversation one day, but I just see this combination of music and wine, jazz, blues, whatever, in a vineyard setting. And I think you two could make some wonderful magic as two great entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
So
Well, and
thank
we have done that, Steve, just so you know. We've done
Oh.
sax in the vineyard at Henry's
Awesome.
Winery many times. and it's a match made in heaven.
Yes,
Perfect.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you. Juliet, thank you.
Welcome.
And continued success in both of your ventures.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Great to see both of you.
Yeah, you too.